this is tape 2 of the 1995 series. This is where we left the cowling with the epoxylite drying the last time we shot footage. Alright, enough watching that swimsuit issue. Jeez, makes you sick. The epoxylite's all dried up before I head out and get some sleep tonight. This dried up. I'm looking around for any flaws in it. Looks pretty solid. Now what I'm doing, I'm taking up a little block with a little bit of a radius in one side. I want to just rough this up and blend in the epoxylite little by little. Now I don't have the final shape on here. I don't have the final dimension, the final look, the final fit, whatever you want to call it. And I just want to see. Usually this stuff dries overnight, but you never know. Now I only let this dry during the day. It's really a little soft and mushy here. I think I'll let it dry overnight. But getting that contour, this is always important, is getting that nice radius contour is always so important. Now, we have the plywood on the edge, of course. Now, one of the things we're going to have to do is make up the cowl hold downs. And then while the hold down is holding it in position, get the final fit all around here. Well, especially up the top. Now you see, since we've put on that 1/64 plywood, it's raised this up a 1/64 of an inch. We've had to go back and realign our spinner fits, take care of all these little joints up here. But I'll do most of this off camera. I got an hour or so tonight. I'll try to work on those fits. And then what I'll do is any place like back up here where it gets real thin, I'll just laminate a little extra piece in there. Because you want to have that nice edge along the edge of the cowling all the time. I'm just dressing off this edge now, and we got a pretty good rough sanding done here. So while I had a little time, I wrapped up a little bit of 220 sandpaper around the back end of an X-Acto knife, and I kind of just plotted out looking down, tried to get the needle valve right in the middle, of course. Now I'll lay out, well, I still have a little time, I'll lay out the hole for the exhaust here, and that'll be one more step ahead before we actually have to make up the cowl mounts. Now by looking down into the exhaust, you can see how I purposely have left the cowl line, split it right down the middle. And what I do is I can plot from this angle, I can see the end of the exhaust here. And I'll just run a ruler, which I've already done off camera, to pick up my two lines. Another trick, always leave plenty of room around here so you can run different mufflers. Number 2, number 3, number 4, number 8, whatever muffler seems to work to balance the plane. You've seen that on the Tsunami videos, how much experimenting can go into, even after you finally build a plane, getting a vertical CG right. Now what I do is I'll go in and cut this out. Off camera I'll do this. I'll just take the Dremel tool and take a wheel and cut that out. Then step 2 is now I bring this up in place and then interpolate out and put this part of the cutout in so I can get the both parts of the cutout in. You can't get them both in at once. You do one, then put the cowl on and do the other half if you have this type of cowl. Now see, from that angle now, you can put the nose piece back on the cowl. Now you can kind of try to do this looking through a lens cap. Now I can plot out the other half, Dremel that out, and I'm in pretty good shape here. I've got all my holing, hey, holier than thou, all my holes cut for the cowl. Now what I like to do is get all my, from this point I can get a ruler laid on here and laid on here and get a nice equal amount of cooling area around the whole exhaust stack here. Now last night, let me put some of this stuff away. Last night when I left here, before I was so rudely interrupted, I had this all sanded out pretty nice. In fact, it still looks pretty decent. And what I want to do now, I got the holes cut in here last night. I'm going to seal the edge of these holes up. Anytime you have end grain showing or plywood showing or these edges, seal it with CA. It gives you a nice edge to work with. I got the hole cut for the muffler, the needle valve. I want to work out the place where I'm going to put the screw for the hole down here. Try to get that engineered up today. The problem is, and I'm trying to make a decision here, the way I want to do this is I'm going to need to put the screw right into the top block here, but that's okay. It won't really be a problem. And then I want to run a pin in the front here, pretty much the way I did last year, to hold the front. Now, a lot of people make a cowling and they really only put one hole down here, and then the front of this is always shaking like a dog shaking his tail. The paint wears out, oil gets in. It's a nuisance. So I always suggest is some way to hold the front down and the back if possible, or if you don't mind seeing the screws on the side of the body, you can use that Les McDonald method with this, or like the Sidewinder and a Griffin where the screws go through the side. That method works okay too. But for now, I think we're going to try to get the pin in the front, a bolt in the back. Make sure it's on now. The idea too is with the cowling on good and solid, I want to finish off the sides. I want to get all these edges and joints and everything finalized, or at least almost finalized. The other purpose of this is to do as much of the work on the plane, the cowling, the carving, the sanding, all of that. Do everything while it's like this. Once you assemble a wing into the body of the plane, man, then you got a whole plane in your way here. So it's a lot more convenient to do it this way. And I always try to finish. I'm going to make the rudder, put the canopy on, try to do everything so that the whole body, when I put it on the plane, it'll just require a minimum of sanding and I'm ready to go right ahead with it. And the reason I'm saying that is I know a lot of people from phone calls and whatever, they call up and, gee whiz, I'm trying to carve the cowling and I keep slipping with the knife and going into the wing. And they put the wing in the body before they even carve the cowling. Well, try to do all the carving, all the sanding, all the mounts, bolts, holes, scoops, the tank mounts, everything. Do it all before you put the wing in the body. Then when you put the wing in the body, you have about 3 hours of work and you have an aeroplane. So for whatever that thought is worth, I'm going to start working on the cowl hold downs and finish this up today. And maybe tonight we'll even get to start the rudder, the canopy we got. I got to do the tank mounts in here. Actually, what I'll try to do is get all the work done on the nose section today. And that'll be a good day if I can finish that up today. I took the motor out so I can finalize this. Just a couple other thoughts, and I'm trying to run these thoughts out of my lips here while they're going through my mind. Everybody really that I know of takes a wing and a tail that they know works well, and this of course is a Pattern Master, and then they redesign or modify the body to suit their personal needs like we did on Tsunami, or actually even on the Cardinal. But the bottom line is there's a couple of basic rules you don't want to violate, and one of those rules is never to make the cowling any bigger than it has to be. When you make a cowling that goes all the way back to here and this whole piece comes off the nose, in effect all you're doing is you may as well leave that part home. It goes along for the ride. The idea is to make the cowling just big enough that you can get the tank in, get the motor in, and that's it. Not a lot more. Not to make the tank, not to make any of these things, you know, what I call Bombay doors, where they go back here or big chunks of the fuselage side come out. The smaller the cowling can be, every time, the better it'll work. And that's absolutely a rule that you can't violate. When a Magnum is the worst cowling on the planet. It just goes along for the ride. It's just a big suitcase going on there. Anyway, just some thoughts. I'm trying to get all the thoughts that I can out here. Why did we make it this small? Why not make it a little bit further back? And any of these things where you drop the tank in through the bottom, oh man, is that a high risk? Maybe it will, maybe it won't deal. Anyway, just some thoughts while they're fresh in my mind. Now once I have this all smooth to a point, seal all the edges, always seal everything. In fact, I'm going to take, before we do anything, after I get this cowl finished, I'll cover the whole cowl with CA. That'll harden up the wood, get the wood rock hard. May even glass it, I don't know yet. But any of the edges where we've cut away the raw wood, up in the nose here, a little bit of a gram or two of extra weight isn't going to make any difference at all. Especially this end grain edge up here. This is one thing, we want to get a nice tight fit in here, and we want to have the wood as hard as possible. We're going to drill that hole for the cowl pin, the pinhole down. And of course we'll harden up all these edges in here. After it dries up, let's get a little on here. After this all dries up, and this is what really will give you a nice edge. Just block sand it right back down. And what you wind up with is a nice hard edge. Again, it's those little details that make the difference between just having a so-so airplane or something that's just okay, and something that's really special, something like Ski Dombrowski would build. Even though none of us are really getting up to his level. I really always make the attempt at doing it, trying to do as much of it like Ski does as I possibly can. Okay, I'm going to drill the pin out first. I'll get this set up to drill a pin for the front hole down. So what I did, I ran a drill into that nose ring. Now keep in mind, this hole has to go up on an angle, otherwise you can never get the cowling in. And I took a little piece of music wire, put some rough, let me take this out, I haven't glued it in yet. It's a little chunk of music wire, roughened up one end with a parting wheel, so it gets a better grip. We'll bury that in epoxy, of course. And just let the tip of the pin stick out here. Hard to do this on a macro lens. Anyway, take my word for it. That pin will lock in there, and then we'll be able to drill the top bolt hole. Now, the idea here is just tack glue this in and make sure it fits right. If not, you can take a little rat's tail file and open up the hole, tighten it up, shim it or whatever. You get a nice tight fit that just fits in there and locks in. That is a real good way to hold a cowl on. So what I did, I tack glued this little pin. Just tack glue it for now. That's all it needs. And make sure when you press this down and you squeeze it in, that you obviously do it with the motor in position too, but you have those nice tight fits around everywhere. And if not, you can grind away, sand away, or fill in with CA as the case may be, but you get all those nice tight fits. Now when you go to take this off, we're going to do the bolt up here. You want to make sure that it's a nice tight fit. If it's a little sloppy, you can put a couple coats of CA in. If it's too tight and you feel like, well, it's you know, just get a rat tail file and open up that hole just a little bit. Now remember, that nose ring is adding a lot of strength to the nose. At the same time, it's holding your cowl in place, so it's not just going along for the ride. And that's how I've done several of these now, including Tsunami. Seems to work real well. Now up here I'll work on the bolt hole next. I got to make up the little piece of plywood with a blind nut and whatever, but that's an important part. Being able to get that right is a big step in the right direction. Now you can see what I did. I put a little brace on here with 64th plywood, the grain going side to side. That just braces it up just a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is get a larger piece of plywood and brace the whole, run it right around from side to side, like a little horseshoe. That'll be double 64th plywood, so the pin will actually be going right through some 32nd plywood when I'm finished. Now because I want the grain going side to side on this, I got to kind of preform it. I'm trying to preform it as best I can. And of course the old trick, sand it and leave the dust on. We'll let this stick out the front and then we'll trim it off. And this should give us a lot of strength and integrity up in the front of the cowl for very, very little weight. Again, this is one of the little details when you build a plane and you want it to last 8-10 years. You don't want to have the cowling self. Nothing's more frustrating than when a cowling self-destructs. It's annoying. Okay, so what I'll do, getting down to the end of the CA here. When you do this, you usually glue your hand right to the cowling anyway. You want to try to get a nice tight fit, and then we'll just trim off the front. And the dust in there will usually kick it right off. Alright, let's show that in close-up. Now you notice I keep a lot of little bottles and tubes. This happens to be a thing of chapstick, because they're all different radiuses, and I can wrap the sandpaper right around them. I have CA jars, all kind of little crazy jars. Every one's a different radius. I want to get in there and sand this before I do the bolt fit. Now I have to trim this off. I'll get a brand new X-Acto knife and trim that off. Let me show that on the close-up anyway. Notice how the grain is going side to side. The grain side to side. And how we have a stress riser. You don't want to run this plywood up here. You want to get rid of the stress. And we'll just trim this off with a razor blade now and final sand it in, and we'll be ready to do the bolt. Another cute thing here, I've been having trouble with this body flip-flopping over, so I've been putting pillows around it. Keeps it in position, it's on the foam. It's a good way to jig a body up so you can work on it like this. Maybe you can use that trick too. Now the final thing over the plywood is, I put a couple thin coats of CA, let it all penetrate in. Sand it down by hand, and you really have a rock solid, I mean this is a rock solid front on this cowling. This should really last a long time. It's one of the first things to wear out. If you look at old planes that go 6, 7, 8 years, the first thing gets oil soaked and ratty and ugly and ridiculous looking is the cowling, and then you start to lose interest in the plane. If the cowling stays nice, the odds are good the rest of the plane will stay nice. Let's show that one more time on a close-up and we're ready to move on. A little plywood reinforcement up there, the pin, the front sanded down nice, and the main thing is it just clicks right in there. Alright, ready to do the bolt hole. Now, and what I'm going to do is, I'm going to plot. I want the bolt, the blind nut to sit right in that block, so I'm going to have to plot. I'm going to have to drill a hole through here, put a piece of plywood underneath somehow, and then drill right through and mark the spot where I want the blind nut to be. Just got a great phone call from John DeTavio. He's out of the hospital feeling good. He's going to be at the contest Sunday. So, anyway, back to our project. What I'm trying to do here with the pin, and I'm going to try to show this, is it's always difficult for people to figure out where to put the bolt and how to get it to line up where you want. Well, it's easy if you lock in the cowl down here, this kind of method. Now you can kind of move the pin around until you have it right in the center of the body. And you want to catch that block right at the very edge. So this is one of the ways I do it, is just keep putting a pin in. You can see I put the pin in 3 or 4 different places here until I get exactly the alignment that I want. Now that I have that, I can sight down and see, because I don't want to have this bolt be way at the back. I'd like it as close to the motor as possible to get a good like a vice effect on it. And I really want to do this with one bolt, so every time I take the cowling off, I can do it with one screw. Alright, that marks my position, where I'm going to drill a hole and where I'm going to put the piece of plywood. Alright, I plotted out this little piece of plywood, 16th plywood. I doubled it up with another piece with grain going the other way. That'll be my floor so that the bolt will bottom out on that, and I want to have that perfectly even with the back of this. Now with the cowl in position, you can just run an 1/8 inch drill right through, and this lines up. Of course, it comes out right in the middle of your little shelf post, and it plots where you're going to have the bolt hole, and this will keep a perfect sandwich. You never want to have a cowling where you're pressing down on this and it's squeezing, because it'll distort the cowl. What this does, it just acts like a little vise. It holds it right here. We'll put a little piece of arrow shaft or tubing up here, but we're never going to have that thing where we're squeezing the cowling into position. You always want to have a sandwich where it's a tight press fit. Now what I did, I took up two pieces of 16th plywood, the grain going this way, grain going this way, and I made up a penny size or a dime size piece of plywood that I'm going to sink right in here with the blind nut in, and that'll be my hole down, actually in one stroke of the pen. I hope it's going to work out that I'll catch it, because I'll line up the blind nut right with the hole that's already in there. Now here's a good little tip when you're making up a blind nut assembly. I put a little bit of 3-in-1 oil or chain lube on the bolt, and then glue the nut in position. And what happens, it puts a little coating of oil right on the threads, and you wind up that you can just get the nut on and off even though there's CA all around it. Now we're going to have to get this plotted right into position on the fuse side. Now you can see we have the little piece of plywood with the nut glued and a little bit of threads hanging out, and now I can just put that right into the hole, and this gives me the outline of where I'm going to have to relieve the wood to sink this down in there. And I'll just take the Dremel tool, cut a little relief there, and sink this right in, but I want it to be perfectly flush so I have that sandwich cowl. I don't want airspace and be squeezing it. I want to have two pieces squeezed together when that cowl is fit. Now with that piece put in and lined up, now I can just take the bolt out, make sure I have a perfectly flat surface, nothing is sticking up on top of it or whatever. And really all this final sanding here will actually get done after we have the block on permanently, but I like to get as much done as possible. Now see where I have little gaps here, I'll just fill it in with the thin CA. Kind of let it fill up. This is why I like to have that oil in a blind nut. Just get a little thing ahead of that. Now what's left is I want to get a little piece of tubing or arrow shaft around this hole. If you just left this hole, every time you went in with an Allen wrench, you'd booger it all up. By the time you got to the gnats, you'd be in the 10th row. What I want to do, I'll just get this, I'll do this off camera, I just got to get a little piece of arrow shaft, sink it in there, and then blend it off nice and smooth. What you can do is just sharpen up a piece of aluminum tubing so it cuts right through the block, right through it, dress off the inside edge, and just press it right down into position. And once I get that through there, I want to line it up with the bolt hole. I can just put a scratch on it and cut it off with a razor blade. Now what you want to do after you sink that in, you want to drop the bolt in position before you glue it to make sure the head of the bolt is centered right down in there. That centers that right in position, nice and tight. You can put a few drops of CA on here just to hold it. And then we'll just sand it right back down. This you can do with sandpaper. Tubing is very soft. Now I just knocked the big piece of the tubing off with a Dremel sanding drum. Get plenty of CA around the wood. Next step is I'm going to soak this whole cowling in CA, harden up the wood, and then sand it down. Now the last step is to dress that hole off. And you can see that's a real nice, neat, reliable. That's the long-term way to do a cowl in my book. Now with the cowl bolted in place, I want to sand all the edges. I want to make sure I have all the... It's been a couple days since we worked on this guy. The second of the circle burner contest is over with now. And we've had so many things going on in the shop at one time, it's hard to keep track of them. And I hope as one of the video subscribers you'll understand we're going to be doing a rebuild of the whole Griffin nose here real soon. And we got some more work to do on Tsunami, and we're going to do some prop work. Ron Kiefer is going to be making me up some real nice, it looks like we got to have them programmed into our machine, the NC machine that he has anyway, some real nice mufflers for 46s and 60s. The circle burner contest is over, and one of the things I want to just take a minute, in case you haven't seen some of the other videos, is we have our wall of honor here, as Midgley would call it. All the victories this year. We won all the local contests except of course for 5th at the Nats. This was a new accomplishment for me, one I'm very proud of. Won 3 appearance awards. Kind of happy about that with old Sunam. Sunam is now retired. Tsunami is now on the back burner. He'll be sitting there as a secondary backup quarterback in the year to come, and we're going to be working on this guy. Just want to walk around the shop here and try to get oriented. We're going to pull off the bottom block this morning, hopefully get it all hollowed out. The circle burner contest is the last contest. It's over with. We won that one too. And now we can go full speed ahead into Strega. We're going to really be making an effort now also on Monday night for whatever you can get an idea here in the mail thing. How many, there's kits going out of here and tapes just flying out of here like water. One of the things that's going to be happening, we're going to try to build a replica of Mike's plane, of course, and we're going to get Brian Kiefer, the new pro stunt protege, and maybe he's on these videos somewhere, I don't even know. What we're going to try to do is get him to do as much of the building on this plane as possible, and I'll be videotaping that, and those tapes will actually be interspersed right in with the Strega Fuse videos. And we're going to have our Monday night classes down here, and the Monday coming up will be the first one, and we hope, actually that's tonight, we hope tonight we're going to get quite a bit done. Join wing sheeting. Ron's got the foam wings already. Jim Damarell's due over. Mike Costello. Hopefully get a lot done in a very short amount of time. So stay tuned. Let's rip off this bottom block and see if we can get it hollowed out. Now, as always, the day you need a brand new razor blade, you find out somebody used the last one and never replaced them. Won't mention any names. But this is always better to do with a double edge with tape on one end. I had to use a single edge and just pop that. You can feel where it goes through the glue. Let's see if we can pry it off here. Oh! All right, now, of course, we'll dress the bottom edge off with a sanding block, and we'll be ready to hollow that. But we want to make the tank compartment next. While the body, now the idea of this is while the body still has the top block containing everything, everything will be in nice alignment. We'll fit the tank in, the tank floor, the V-deflector, or whatever we're going to do up here. And of course, to make sure that we can get the tank over the nose ring. That's one of the things that's always a problem. You have to engineer it up so you can get the tank in and out. Now what I always like to do is get, because there's always some little high spots that stick up on the block, get this flat so when we do get a joint, we'll get a nice joint on there. And we can put that away for hollowing, and we want to really carefully go over the bottom of this. so that when we join this back up, we'll have a nice smooth joint. And then anything that won't come off with the sanding block, we don't want to change the shape, of course. We'll just pick out all the extra little high spots. I just love when somebody uses up stuff around here and then doesn't replace it. Take heed. Anyway, I got to put double-edged razors on my list. Good thing to mention here is I keep a list right over by my desk of things that are running out of stock, so that every time I order or buy or go shopping or whatever, I can get more. And of course, if somebody's here building, which we did have over the weekend, if somebody's here building and they use up the last of the CA or the razors and they don't put it on my list, I don't even know we're running out. Okay. Now we can get the cowl mount from the back now with some slow drying CA. And always a good trick here, a good trick when you're working around blind nuts. Take a little bit of WD-40, put it on the bolt. The WD-40 keeps the CA out of the threads. Leave that in there and you will not wind up with a lot of goop in the threads, hopefully. Kick it off. Keep the bolt moving as you're doing it, and then you won't wind up with any CA in the threads. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is plot the former out. I'll make a little pattern for the former that's going to go right behind here. Now, one of the choices you have is 1/8" plywood. That's a good choice. What I'm going to do is laminate it up out of cross-grain balsa, 45 thousandths balsa, with the grain going corner to corner. Very important. You make a pattern and then put all your laminates in with the piece going corner to corner. That'll save a few grains. Then we'll do the same thing with the tank floor. We'll make the tank floor a pattern and then grain corner to corner. Remember, the whole secret to making a light, strong nose is get all the grain in corner to corner. If you put it inside to side, yeah, that's good, or front to back or whatever. But it's the strongest corner to corner. That's always the best way to do it if you're going to use balsa. If you use plywood, you can always put the piece in, cut it out of the plywood at a 45-degree angle, but we could save a few grains there, a few grains in the tank floor, and since we have everything else solid as a rock, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Now you can see we have a piece of 45 thousandths balsa. This is just a pattern. We're going to use this, and we're going to start laminating one piece right on top of the other with the grain cross. So we'll wind up with 5 laminates of 45 thousandths here. Now you see the trick here is you have the same piece, 45 thousandths. You want to go corner to corner with this. Remember, when you're trying to make any kind of aircraft structure where you want to reduce the weight the most, geodetic, you got to make geodetic triangles. What this in effect becomes is triangles. A box shape is very weak, a triangle is very strong. So we're going to glue this one, then we're going to glue the next one. So each one, the grain is going to go corner to corner, corner to corner. And just let that piece dry. In fact, we glued it right to the table. Once that's dried, and we actually use the corners to nip it right off. Brand new X-Acto. Now you're probably saying, wow, this guy uses a lot of X-Acto blades. Yeah, but getting those nice clean cuts means there's not going to be as much glue in the plane. Weight, and glue is a lot heavier than balsa wood. And when you think of the overall cost of a plane, even 100 extra X-Acto knives is a cheap investment. Okay, now we have that. We want to go back and sand that edge. Just dress it off and make sure it still fits in there. We don't want to build this up all, so each piece is going to be a little bit bigger. You don't want to take so much off, but each time you laminate a piece on, just dress the edge and go test fit it. Make sure it's not either growing or shrinking. Nothing worse than getting done with the whole thing, and then you find out, oh my God, it's the wrong shape. What you'll see is each time you laminate this, oh boy, it's getting stiffer, it's getting stiffer. Now this is relatively weak. This is only 90 thousandths now. When we connect these corners, it's going to get real stiff. Then we go back and put the other laminates in. There'll be 5 laminates all together. That'll be as stiff or stiffer as than 1/8 inch plywood, and about 1/3 the weight. You know, each time we add a laminate, we're going to check and make sure that's a tight fit, nice tight fit. Want some big sloppy thing? I don't want to even see light in the corners when I get done with that. That's an integral part of the plan. If you're not comfortable doing this method, use the 1/8 inch plywood method. But make sure no matter what you do, you always go corner to corner, whether it's plywood or balsa. What that does, in effect, it turns it into 2 triangles. See, that's the whole thing. The corners try to change shape with the torque of the engine. So what you're always trying to do is connect opposite corners. Turn everything into triangles. Now, after each laminate too, I go over the edge with thin CA. That penetrates into the corner. Now that keeps a nice hard edge. We know we have this edge exactly the right shape for a nice tight fit. So this will harden up the edge. We won't just hit it with sandpaper and whoops, we lose the edge. Just let that kick off and then we'll go in, trace this out. Now we want to go the other 2 corners. Just go corner to corner. And we'll just repeat this 5 times. I'll do the rest of this off camera. 5 times. And then we'll have our laminate. Now we glued that piece permanently in. Of course, take a 90-degree triangle. Make sure this is 90, this is 90, and that you're 90 top and bottom. When it's all done, squeeze it, tack it in from one side, let a nice bead of thin CA go in, and then filler it with a bead of thick CA. Now that piece is in. Now we're going to make up the tank floor. First thing we have to do is get out a 6-ounce tank, lay it in here, and plot out exactly where that tank is going to be. Now the first calculation I have to make, I have to be able to slide this tank in through the front, and it's got to clear the nose ring. So I have to make a like a imaginary point at which I want the tank floor. Tank floor can't come any further forward than that. There's a 6-ounce tank. All the tubes are forward. I'm also going to put an 1/8 inch shim on top of the tank so I can raise and lower it. It'll never have to go lower than that, but up as almost 1/8 of an inch, and then I can get my tank floor pattern made. What I did, I made up a pattern here. Of course, I have an 1/8 inch tank shim that you'll never have to shim a 60 more than an 1/8. Press that down. Now, what I need to do is shorten this until I can just get the tank out the front. See, I have to mark that. Now I'll just mark that again to verify that they can't be any lower than that when I glue it in. And I'll be able to slide the tank in and out. Then I'll make the front part of this just come up on an angle. I'll actually use the tank itself for the angle that I need, so I can slide the tank in and out. Whoop! There goes the tank shim. And then of course have a tank shim. And we'll get some of that nice plastic sheeting from Suarez, so it's nice and easy to get the tank shim in and out. Now, I made this piece out of 16th plywood. I'm going to pull this up and do my geodetic thing with 5 layers of 75 thousandths balsa, 5 layers of 45 thousandths, I'm sorry. I'm going to connect the corners on each piece. Turn it over, connect the corners. So it'll be 16th plywood and 90 thousandths with corner grain. All the grain going corner to corner. Now, real important to get that corner to corner deal. Now, I'll do this off camera. This is basically just redundant to what we've done for the back former. Certainly, if you didn't have any 45 thousandths wood, 16th would be fine, or extra laminates of 32nd. But getting that grain corner to corner is the whole secret. going to do with this, after engineering this all up, this was a last minute thing, I'm going to put another lamination of 16th plywood on the other side so that I have a sandwich here, because I can see where I'm going to put the air vents. I'm actually going to be using part of the air vent for plywood, so there's no point not putting it in right now. I'll just save myself one extra cut later. So I'm going to double this up. Same thing, I won't even be redundant about that. I won't even put this on. And then this will be the tank floor, and we'll be ready to spot glue this in, make sure we can get the tank in and out, and then glue it right up. Now this is one of those parts that you just keep putting in and keep sanding the edges till you have a perfectly tight fit. You can't even see air around. This is going to be doing a lot of work, carrying a torque of the engine back into the wing. You really do want a nice tight fit, not a big sloppy fit, that's for sure. I made up some doublers, grain going straight up and down. These are going to go on the sides of the tank to keep the tank right in the middle of the fuselage. And of course we want to get super tight fits here. Now what this means is you have a 3/32 shim on each side of the tank. It's actually adding some strength to the fuselage instead of just going along for the ride. There's nothing to me more of a pain in the neck than when you get these shims that hold the tank in, and they're just going for the ride and they get all oil soaked and everything. If you're going to pack the tank, pack it in before you actually paint the plane even. Let that all go along for the ride. Okay. Let's see what these shims do. They locate the tank right in the center of the fuse. And of course you want a relatively tight fit. And that's adding some torque resistance to the fuselage. You'd already have to put them in anyway. So you just want to have enough clearance that you can get the tank out. Now nothing will hurt a motor run more than if the tank is in like this, like that, cocked up, cocked down. So we're trying to make a perfect box here for the tank. I got one glued in, and I'll take some slow zap and glue this one in. Okay, we got both of these glued in now. Now that should give us a perfect ledge. Drop our tank floor on. Makes a perfect box. Let's see if we can look at that a little bit different way here. Alright, we're almost ready to put this in now. Now the only final thing is the tank gonna fit? And do we need a little more clearance? Bingo. Just make sure you can get that tank in and out before you go any further. Now with the tank floor in there, what I like to do is hold the fuselage in this dimension and drop glue right down onto the seams. Now watch it roll around the corners so it gets all the corners. Just let it roll into every corner. I don't want to have any way that oil, once it gets in here, can get back into the body. Or back into the wing, I should say. Let it just roll around till it comes on all the corners. You can see it rolling down. Gets to the end, let it roll back. This way you get an even amount. Get a nice bead of CA in there. Don't kick it off, let the dust kick it off. As soon as you can see it coming out the front, you know you've got it, the whole bead. Let it roll right back. Back onto the other corner. Boy, that puts a nice bead of glue on things. Okay, we'll show this, well, I'll show this on a close-up here. Okay, I just want to try to show what this looks like from the front view. And boy, when you squeeze this nose, this sucker is solid now. Now what I did again, I made a little piece up here, ran this up on an angle so I have a little floor, and then made sure, of course, I can get the tank in and out. That's the main thing right now. Don't build a nose that you can't get the tank in and out. Now when I'm all done, I'll sand that flat so we have a perfectly flat floor. So this will actually taper up a little bit, It just allows the tank to drop in just a little bit. See if we can show this on a macro lens. You can see the little taper I've put up there. And that's what allows the tank to go in and out. Now, next step is I put in another plywood former here, which will be the end of the V deflector, and then I'm going to run the V deflector up here and then cut my exhaust outlet holes here. Much in the same way we do the typical Cardinals and whatever. We're going to have that side air outlet on this guy. This is step one of this V deflector. This is Greenaway and type nose construction. I get the angle on this and the angle in the back, so I have two angles sanded in here, and of course I have to make the other piece off camera. And I'm dropping them all down 1/8 of an inch, so I'm an 1/8 inch below this because I'm going to put a piece of cross grain across here, and then I can hollow the whole block out. Now, of course, we just have to make the mirror image the other side of this, and you got to sand the angle in gradually. You want to get nice solid joints there before you cut the exhaust outlet hole. And we'll have to taper the front in here too. And we get it all sanded in, and we'll just tack glue it in place. That has to go in a little bit more. I'm just cutting up some cross grain going side to side. I'll put that piece in, put another piece, and fill it right in, right up to the front. I'll be ready to cut the air outlets.
I am. I came down to say hello and good night.
Okay.
I've been in my feet a lot of hours today. I've had it.
Do you guys have any interest in seeing Schooner Fair this year when they come around?
Our Monday night class, and here's our professional wing skin joiner. All right, Brian, join us a wing skin on video. Show these turkeys how to join a wing skin. That's it. You got it. All right, now take the towel, wipe it real quick. Don't let it glue to the table. All right, turn the towel around now. Turn it. That's it. Now it glues to your hand. All right, now sand it.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. All these guys out in Stuntville here, they don't know you can build planes, huh? Look at this. What's Ostello up to? Ostello joined the wing today. It
only took me an hour to cap one half of one wing.
Oh my God.
As soon as you stopped working on the plane, it slowed down.
All right.
The Monday night building classes are in action.
White sanding.
All right. That's it. We got more Chiefs than Indians here, but it's turning out to be a big success. How's your project coming here, fella?
I'm ready to bring it home and
bring it home and do your thing.
Start the fuse. I got a crutch built, but I think I'm going to start a new crutch because I didn't like the way the first one came out.
How about this guy? Oh, this is Ron's controls.
That's
Ron's controls there. Okay.
No, we don't have any Jaguar plans. That's we got the wings and we got a motor and.
How you doing with the wing skins there, Chief?
Pretty good.
Boy, Scott Smith could eat his heart out. Trace, don't press too hard down on the pen. Believe me, you grow up, you'll be as smart as I am. You can make $3 an hour anytime McDonald's will hire you. Lay out a nice straight line.
Don't trust you to lay.
We're watching Florida, video from Florida. The Florida meet, Jim Damarell took some footage, Bill Simons and the contest they had down there. Had two really good pizzas, and we're turning Brian into the sheeting slave. He's going to sheet foam wings for free. The teachers are on strike where he goes to school, so build up a bunch of planes. Great idea. Get busy, boy. Come on, boy, we got to go. Now, I got to tell you, we really had a great session last night. We really had a great class. And it was really impressive to see how much work you can get done in such a few times. Everybody was helping everybody. Everybody went home with a lot more accomplished than if they just sat home alone. Anyway, this morning want to finish some of the carving, some of the hollowing on this top block. I want to get busy hollowing the top block as the next step. Then I have to cut the vents in the fuselage side and hollow out the top block. But for those who haven't seen it, my technique is I run a red pen line. In this case, I leave it a little more than even the amount I want to use. I want to hollow this to 1/8 of an inch. Just use your finger to run the bead. If you can't do this accurately this way, another good way to do this, a really excellent way, is take some 1/8 inch tape and run it along the edge and then just trace the tape out. But you don't want to make the block, even if you're going to try to hollow it out more than a normal amount and do a super light job, you don't want to go less than 1/8 of an inch, or you wind up where it buckles and the dope shrinks and it shrivels up and it starts to look like an old prune or like Midgley's face or something. You really don't want to overdo the hollowing. What's more important is to get it all even. Get it that it's 1/8 inch throughout rather than have it super paper thin in some spots where you can see through it and then lumpy and bumpy in other spots with ridges and things. Now, because these blocks are not super light, certainly this isn't 4-pound wood, that's for sure. We're going to try to do a real good, and I'll probably spend the rest of today just hollowing this one block before I even start the other one. I want to leave some extra meat back here by the cowl mount. I don't want to have that paper thin where the cowl mounts and pull up the bolt and pop the block. Here's our X-Acto tool of choice, even though this one is rusted up from laying in a cellar for a year. It's a brand new blade that's rusted. I don't know if this came from the factory rusted or what. I'll put this on a handle. Sharp blades. These blades usually last. This is a good tip. It usually lasts about half of a top block and then they get dull. So I'll see how long this goes. I need to get some of these extra blades anyway from SIG. I'll order up a couple packages. Now what I do is I keep an ongoing list over at my desk. You can see how long this list is of things I'm going to need to build this plane. So now that I'm going to order things from SIG, once I'm going to order them, now I know I'm going to need the blades. I'll put them on a list, so I always have an ongoing updated inventory list, so I'm not in the middle of this job, hopefully, either not going to run out of balsa wood or beer or something more, even more important. You know, keep the inventory up to date. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to plot out air exit holes in the bottom block. I want them to line up with the holes up here. So I'm just making some rough cuts. Again, the only purpose of this is to get a little extra air out of the top of the cowling. Nothing super exotic here. Just want to relieve a little bit of that air pressure up there. Getting the air away from the head and from the exhaust side of the motor is the two most important things. So what this will do in effect is relieve some of that pressure. Okay. I'll do most of this carving right, actually I'll do it right off camera. No point tying up a whole lot of video. Just going to scoop these in before I actually do the hollowing, and if I can leave a little extra meat here and do the final sanding out with a dot anyway.
No rap, no hard stuff, and no sleepy elevator music.
See, now what I've done is after I put on the tape and kind of got the alignment that I want for these outlets, then I just trace it out in red pen. Now I can just carve and sand with a block right up into that tape. Now the next step is I want to take the cowling itself and make sure I'm getting a good match into the air vents. And boy, it doesn't get a whole lot closer than that. That's perfect. So I have these little channels that the air will go through, hopefully clear all the hot air off the head. Now the rest of this I'm going to do with a sanding block. I'll look around for a dowel here, get a sanding block. I try to keep all my old, you can see what's in here, sanding belts. What I'd like is like a piece of a ringmaster leading edge would be perfect if I could find it. No guarantee you can ever find anything around here. Anyway, piece of tubing. This will be good for working that curve in. Try to get out some things that have a curve in them. Really would like to have that ringmaster leading edge. Some of this sticky back paper will be nice to have. We'll make some 220. Maybe a dowel. Maybe what I'll have to do is go get a broomstick. Here's another dowel that'll be useful. That's what you need to work in an inside curve. Okay. Now we got some sticky back old 80 grit paper. And what looks like it was a nice dowel. Now I have to leave this hanging off the table. If you're really having a problem, it wouldn't be a bad idea to even tack glue this on or have somebody hold it. And you could work this scoop right in here, this curve. Work right up into the tape with some 80 grit. As soon as you see the tape starting to disappear, you could get rid of the 80 and switch over to 220. This goes kind of fast, by the way, and it's a nice way to add some extra cooling. Of course, we're going to have the side cooling vents on this too. But you never have too much engine cooling. Never. Now once you're happy with that contour, you can pretty much get rid of the tape and do the rest by eye. Of course, now we'll switch over to a finer grit of sandpaper. Get rid of the 80, pick up the 220, 240 in this case, and get that final contour in there. And when we're all done, we'll harden it up with CA. The reason for hardening up with CA is this is going to be a reverse curve that's going to want to lift. The dope is going to want to pull away from this. So the CA will get a nice tooth into the raw wood, I hope. And these edges, we'll want to get a nice tooth on those edges for sure. And then, of course, we'll eyeball it up from the front and try to get it completely equal and match up the venting right into the back of the cowling. Do like a port and polish job on this. You know, final sanding on this, maybe with some 400 or 320 here. Just final sand it out, and because we're using a dowel, both sides should be hopefully relatively equal. Then we'll match up the flow pattern from the cowling to this to see that we have kind of a symmetrical even. And what we're going to try to do is get that real symmetrical. That's how that's going to fit on a plane. Let's see if you can see that up close. I don't know if you can kind of see. Whoa. You can actually look from the back here and see that we've got it pretty well, actually real well lined up. Take credit for this myself here. That looks real good. I want to show this from the back here. This is actually more important than the front. Just give me a minute here to focus in on this. You can see how the airflow will match up. I don't know if you can really see this. It'll match up real well. You can see kind of the air scoop there. Now, one of the things I just wanted to show, I was looking around this morning actually at my old MiG pictures, and this is how I had done the MiG, and I really liked that, and the motor did run exceptionally well in the MiG, so we have a lot of high hopes for this. This is just some of the pictures of the MiG. Here's the old MiG. This is 1983. This is exactly the same cowl shape, actually, except for the front here a little bit that we had on the MiG with that downward exhaust muffler and everything. Anyway, MiG was kind of a cool plane, and we always did have good motor runs in the MiG, so no reason to think this is not. Look at this, more of these cowling pictures while we're thinking about cowlings. 1983, a long time ago. That was a good flying plane. Good looking plane. Hey, first top 5 plane at the Nats. Brag, 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 hey. Anyway, back to our project plane. Project plane over here has the same bottom scoops. Let's hope that's all going to work out. From this angle you can really see. I don't know if you can see just how the air is going to come out. It looks like two evil eyes from a pumpkin or something. Anyway, just one of the little touches I like to put on all the planes is nice cowl scoops, nice air inlets. And what's real nice about this one is we'll be able to fly this hopefully over grass because we won't have the big lip sticking out the front that always gets damaged. This will probably be a very realistic, very efficient cowling here. Let's hope anyway. All right, next step's going to be to hollow out this block no matter what we do. Pull it off and hollow it. Now, as always, I'll try to get as much of this out of here with the razor. But be real careful up by the scoops. You really have to, because you're carving back into some scoops. But if you leave a little extra meat up in the nose there, it certainly won't hurt anything. Now, we may not be able to finish this afternoon, I don't know. Work is calling, but as I said before, we're doing split shifts. We'll work on this a little while longer, see how much we can get done. And we'll finish it up tonight or tomorrow morning, whenever. So, anyway, it's just a question of carving away. Carve right up to the red line. And when we stop, we stop. We'll pick this up in the next shift. Now, yesterday, I remember I was carving and hollowing this out. And I'm going to try to finish this up today, but just worth mentioning, as I look back at what I got done yesterday, I'm going to start this area up here, and it's really difficult to reverse curve it. So what I'm going to do is just try to get a lot of the meat out here in the beginning, and then hold it up to a fluorescent light and mark with a red pen where it's starting to get real thin. That's the technique I've been using in the past. I also, as you get toward the back of it, you need to go to the thin gouge. I don't have a thin gouge sitting right here that's sharp. I have a whole bunch of dull ones, so maybe I'll run over to Hobby Shop and pick up a fresh set of gouges so that I can get the back real nice too. But this area up in the front, you can see where the scoops actually come in. Carving the reverse part of it can really get to be a complex thing, and it takes time. I'm just going to kind of go real slow from this point on because I really do want to get the blocks nice and hollow. Now, at this point in time, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. What I'm doing is holding the top block up and finding dark spots where the light doesn't really shine through. Mark it with my hand, and then just do the last little bit of hollowing. Now, one of the tricks, I'm getting down to the nitty-gritty here as far as carving this out. I try to get as much out carving. When you get to the last little bit, hold it up to the light, mark it with a red pen. Now you know you can't get it any thinner there. When you get it paper thin that you can almost see the light bulb through it, mark it with a red pen, hit it with a little CA, and you'll know, uh-oh, don't go down, don't carve that anymore. Getting that last little bit out. Now this block is probably maybe a little more than an ounce right now. Getting that last little bit of weight out is a very, very time-consuming thing, and I'll try to get it out with some 80 grit sandpaper. But basically, the name of the game right now is patience. Keep holding it up to the light, find the thin spot, mark it with a red pen, and don't get carried away. Don't go for that last little bit, or you wind up with a patch and a hole, and then you have to, what a pain in the neck. Forget about it. Now, as I'm working and massaging this block up, what these are all the thin spots that I've marked with the red pen where I'm getting, and I don't know if you're going to see this on the video here. Probably not going to see this very well. Well, I can't even see it through the lens cap. Anyway, when you start to see the light coming through here, you know, and you can feel it, you're down to, probably here, we're down to 1/16. Well, that's too thin. I just start now at one end of the block, and I'm working my way up toward the front. Every time I see a thin spot, whoop, stop, 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 stop. The rest of this I'll get out with sandpaper. But what's going to happen now, when I get up to the front here, it's going to get a little difficult to carve those reverse curves, or maybe I'll just leave the extra wood in there. Since it's up in the front, it won't really matter. And then I'll get the rest of this out with sandpaper. But this is a good way to keep from going through, or Al Rabe used to say, you know, the block is never thin enough until you've gone through about 7 times. Yeah, Well, that's true too, but if you can keep from going through, it'll just save you a lot of filling and wrinkles in the finish later on. Now what I did, I finished up the job with the small gouge to get in the corners, just to give you an idea. Almost the whole block now is paper thin. If you hold it up to the light, everywhere that you see this is red, it's paper thin. So now I'm going to make up a sanding block. You get an idea of just how thin that really is. It's like a piece of bamboo or something. Who the heck knows? Anyway, and I had to be real careful because of these reverse scoops. I'm going to get some 80 grit and a couple of those sanding dowels and try to get in there and get some of that material, at least the little mountaintops, taken off. Won't spend all day trying to make it pretty, but there's still some more material. A couple of grams can come out of there. Notice almost the whole thing is paper thin. And hey, Al Rabe, I didn't go through once, so this block must be too heavy, that's for sure. Who knows? I guess we're going to find out sooner or later. Now what I always start with, like a piece of a broomstick and some of this old 80 grit paper. The older the paper is, the softer and better it gets. And I'll start up at the front, start from the edge and work to the middle. And now the deal is here is just sand off the red ink. As soon as you sand off the red ink, work your way back. If you go through the red ink and you just keep going and going, you're going to come out with the China syndrome, the balsa syndrome. Anyway, this is not a very time-consuming thing. We won't be seeing the finish on this. Then what we're going to do is go back again, hold it up to the light, find out any really, really thin spots and hit them with thin CA. Mark them with a red pen, hit them with thin CA. Now look. I'm just leaving the tips of the red on there, just a little bit, and that's about, I'll go do the rest of this off camera, but you sure don't want to go through and make this all paper thin. See, if you have really good 4-pound wood, 5-pound wood, you don't have to bother getting this last little bit out, but this wood is certainly not the best piece of wood in the world. And I'm really trying to get out every little bit of material that I can. Every time I can save a 1/4 of an ounce or so, you know, it's a 1/4 of an ounce I can put into something that's really going to do some good, and instead of a Christmas ornament, what the bottom block usually is. Now I'm down to having just the last little bit of the ink lines, and I keep holding it up to the light and looking for low spots. It's half decent here, not too bad. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to finish this up with a piece of 220. Just do it by hand, in fact, or a piece of foam. And I have left a little bit of extra meat up around the cowling here, and a little bit of extra meat around the scoop so they don't get real flimsy. And I've tried to get all of it out of the back. Almost everything out of the back. In other words, the block really should be the thinnest back here. Maybe it could be down to 1/16 even, and up here maybe be an 1/8 if you really had an all-perfect world. But considering this was probably a 7 or 8 pound piece of wood, I guess it didn't come out too bad. Okay, for tonight, that's about all we're going to get done. We'll pick this up tomorrow, and we'll hopefully, we got to cut the air scoops in the sides of the fuselage. But I'd say for now, this is not the worst block in the world, even though it's not been a great piece of wood, that's for sure. It does come out relatively straight. We don't have any real spots we've gone through, so anyway. We've cleaned up the shop, and tomorrow morning we'll get a nice fresh start on reality here. Get those holes cut in the sides of the fuselage. Now tonight I only have a little bit of time, so I just want to plot out. Want to plot roughly where my exhausts are going to come out here. Now, before I even do this, this is a lot easier to do, believe me, if you cut the holes before you join the sides. But in this case, because we didn't know what the final cowling shape, the final exhaust exit was, we have to do it this way. And what I'll do is I'll practice on one side and firm up the technique I want to use, and then make a pattern. And from the pattern, I'll be able to do the second side in a matter of, you know, half the amount of time. Anyway, and what I'm trying to do now is do little bits and pieces of this every time I get a half an hour. Right now, tonight, I have a half an hour. I'd like to get this all laid out, and tomorrow I can get right in here with the tools and cut it right open. Now what I did, I took some measurements from inside where the V deflector is, and I'm just transposing this out. And what I want to do is the front part I want to follow the cowl line, and the back part I want to have a completely square, and I want it to blend right into the fuse side. One of the things I don't like is when you have these holes and then you have a little lip here at the end. It kind of ends and then it has a lip. I don't want to have that. I want to have a nice smooth airflow out. So the easiest way now, and if you've never had to do this before, after the fuse side is in place, the only realistic way to do this is with a Dremel tool. We'll have to put a pointy grinding bit on. Again, finalize the shape that we want. Make sure the edges are all sealed with CA. I haven't done this a few times. The easiest way I know of is just hang the shaft drive Dremel tool. Use one of those real pointy bits. Lay this out and just cut the shape, and it really does take time. If you have the little Dremel saw, that's real nice, but we don't happen to have one right now, so we're going to make do with this. See, what we want to have is that smooth flow, that smooth exit here. And I'm going to dress all this off with a little sanding block. By the way, one of the things that makes a great sanding block for doing this is the old machinist ruler, because it has nice square edges and it's just about the right size to get in there. A nice machinist ruler. Now the idea here is now to try to clean up all the edges if we can. Get a nice clean edge. I don't want to see any of those double edges. Boy, that looks terrible. Next step is I want to rough finish this hole off. Again, the machinist ruler, you need real sharp corners to get in the corner to make this type of a scoop. I want those real smooth air outlets. I don't want any restriction. By the way, this is let's give some credit here to Big Jim. This is his personal nose construction method, and this really is a super way to build an airplane. Improvise all you want. There aren't many methods that'll flow a lot more air than this. Now what I'm going to do, I'll do it off camera. I'm going to line all these edges with 64th plywood, and that, believe it or not, is a relatively time-consuming thing. I don't want to eat up a half an hour of video showing that, since most people probably won't even want to do that. But that's just for my own, one of those detail touches that I like to have on my planes. And I'll make up little patterns out of cardboard or out of 64th plywood and line all the edges. So in effect, I'll have a 64th plywood edged. One of the things it'll do too is keep all the edges around the scoops nice and you know, sharp. Of course, we'll harden them with CA also. And next step, I'll cut up some patterns of 64th plywood and start laminating all of the sides in 64th plywood, and where this exits, I'll have real nice edges to work off it in. Alright, I got the first piece of plywood, 64th. Notice the grain is going straight up and down. Now this edge, if you leave a little edge out there, you can just block sand it right in. And we see we dinged this up already with the Dremel tool. Make a little balsa plug, just like the repair video, shove it in there and sand it in right now, and then get this perfectly sanded, this whole area. We're also going to make this little piece that goes up here and a little piece that goes here. I haven't done it yet. Now it's also a good idea as you're sanding this out to keep the edges a little soaking of CA on there. Keep them nice and solid. You won't have nothing that looks stupider than seeing the edges go like that. This keeps it, it looks like you took a laser light and cut that channel right in there. Now I have these rough pieces in. You can see how I left them sticking out, and now I'll just block sand this nice. Just very gently block sand it in. You can get the big piece off with a knife, of course, and give this a whole nice surface. Harden up the whole edge with CA, and you will have one really nice, really well, very efficient scoop. Now any little dings you have around the edge here, what I do is just fill them right up with CA. I think this one doesn't look so bad. But you'll always get a couple little gouges. It's almost impossible not to. Go over the whole outline with thin CA. And then the old Q-tips trick. And what that does, it hardens up, whoop, blew it right to there. Hardens up the edge of the wood, and you can get a nice edge on it. The dust helps kick it right off. Get an idea how many patterns. I made about 40 patterns. And what I do, I just make one oversized, make one a little undersized. I probably made 20 here, some more over here that just didn't fit. Getting the patterns the right size is like 3/4 of the problem. Once you get that squared away, the rest is just a matter of block sanding it in. Get it nice and clean up the edges, harden it with CA. Now here's where that machinist ruler really is worth its weight in gold. To get right in these corners. Get nice edges, nice corners. These are the little quality touches. You get a plane and you get 18, 19 appearance points, and then the judges take a real close look, and all of a sudden you're in the front row by yourself. Now we're going to put a cockpit on this plane, a real genuine cockpit with instruments and everything, so we really have left on this tape to finish hollowing out the top block, and we'll probably be starting another tape. Try to keep most of the cockpit work on a one tape. But you just, believe me, these nice little scoops, nice little touches, this is really a big part of having one of those knockout front row models, and I really do want this to be a knockout. I really just don't want another pretty face in the crowd. Now it's just this edge. We're just going right around the whole edge, and this keeps the wood hard. Wipe it real quick with the... And of course, to do the other side, you just reverse the whole procedure, mirror image it, and you're all set. Now here's where the machinist ruler really comes in handy. Wrap some 220 around the machinist ruler, and you can get right in. And it's just common sense. You would like to have this to be a smooth flow. So air is going to be flowing through here for the whole life of the plane. And boy, I wouldn't want to do this without thanking Big Jim for showing me this method, putting the nose together. You run the motor this way, you make the nose, you always have good motor runs. Everything else is maybe. This is his V-deflector technology, and it has worked to perfection. Now, we're also going to put, I'm going to show this up close, a little gusset in one of the corners. Let's show this up close. Now you can pretty much see what a nice clear shot the air has to get out of there. I try to get this to come to a nice smooth point. Sand all the corners. Now see up in this corner here, this is what I wanted to show. Let me get it on the macro lens. Right up here I have a gusset, and the grain doesn't go straight up and down or side to side, it goes corner to corner. So what you do is I'm going to lop off the other piece, put a piece in this corner, that completes the box. Now we have a complete box. And boy, that nose is rigid. That is one of the really nice features of working with this Big Jim construction. And of course the scoops have a real smooth outlet. You don't have that notch here where it catches and then all the oil builds up in there. This is really a nice way to do it. All lined with plywood, a real quality touch. Now this morning I want to go over all the glue joints, and I took my machinist ruler again, of course, put some tape up at the end so the sandpaper can't go back and forth. And this is I've said this over and over, but I guess I'm a fanatic about it, I guess, is to get all the joints inside this scoop. Believe it or not, this scoop, getting everything nice and square and even, is a really important part of having that, what let's call the final touch or whatever. Just having a scoop is fine, but people are going to look inside this, and if they see big slimy glue joints and things, not going to add, especially if they judge it at the nats that way or whatever, if the plane ever gets to the nats. Nice smooth inside, and we'll of course buff this out too, so we want to start with a nice flat surface, and a machinist ruler makes an excellent tool for doing this. Now a lot of people underestimate just how much time and effort goes into making a nice set of scoops. Cowling scoops, or if you do the P-51 Mustang scoop. Now STREGA doesn't have a belly scoop like a real Mustang does. The one we're going to model doesn't, so we want to keep as much of the focal point on the parts that we do have. And of course this is not a part of the real model here. But this is a good technique. This is one that you can apply over and over again. And here's the point too. It's a lot easier to do this sanding now than after the body and wing are joined, and then the wing is in the way every time you get sandpaper in here. Also from the front, it's real easy to get in there, get all the angles sanded as best as you can. Before you even fuel proof it, get everything nice and smooth. Seems redundant, but that's part of what makes a really top quality plane instead of just a mediocre or just an ordinary front row plane. Now the next step I got, this was drawings that I got from Mike of the 10 square inch rudder that he's going to use. So what I've done is I've made some little carbon, IBM card patterns for a rudder, and I want the rudder to be roughly the same amount of square inches. So I'm just sitting here and playing paper dolls, trying to come up with a shape that I like, and this is the easiest way to do it rather than just make rudders. Just sit and trim angles, put some angles on it, put a point here, a curve here, until you get a shape that you really think represents what you have in your mind's eye view. But keep in mind, one of the dimensions we want to keep constant is 10 square inches. 10 square inches. So what I did, I transposed this out onto Mike. This is Mike's rudder here, to make sure I have roughly 10 square inches. And these are all at the, see, the only little bit I've changed it is not really much at all. Now it takes quite a bit of time to come up with a rudder shape that you're happy with. We're not happy with this yet, but what we do have is the right amount of square inches. So what we're going to do now is just change the angle a little bit, change the rake, maybe put a curve in here, come up with some changes until we're happy with that rudder shape. And we'll just do it all with IBM cards until we come up with a shape, tape them to the fuselage. Now what it does, it lets you look at it from a lot of different angles, get an idea how this is going to look while it's flying. Again, you just have to play paper dolls. But keep in mind, what we're looking for is 10 square inches of movable Rabe rudder and a smaller than last year amount of side area. We want to reduce the side area, so we're going to try to shrink the whole total rudder area. Now, as I've said before, rudder area is this very critical thing, and what we've done in the past, all of these rudders seem to be a little on the small side. All of them are basically about 7 square inches, and we're looking to up that to 10. So what we're trying to do also is keep a certain amount of overhang, and it's roughly from where the elevators end to where the rudder begins, roughly a ½ inch. We're working with those dimensions right now, and this is just a game of musical chairs. Look back at all the rudder shapes and see which one you're real happy with, comfortable with, or whatever. We're trying to maintain some of this look, this squared off kind of look, so it'll just be a question of let's see how many paper dolls we have to cut out before we find one we're happy with. Now another way to do this, if you don't want to keep cutting up the pattern, is just black out some areas just to get some different looks. Black them out. But always try to maintain that whatever ship you're copying, roughly the same amount of side area. And what I'm doing here, I'm really trying to come up with a look that looks a little bit like STREGA without making it that it's so semi-scale that you can get a little bit better idea after looking like that. Anyway, we're just going to play with this till we come up with a final shape. Now when I trace these cardboard parts out onto, in this case we're going to use soft 1/4 inch wood, I'm going to make them just a little bit oversized so I can sand in the final, if I want to have a final change in the shape, I won't have to go making new parts. I'll leave them about an 1/8 inch oversize. Always a good idea to make them a little oversized, then you can make a little change if you want to at the last second. And I want to have the grain going on the front of the rudder. See, I don't care about the hinge line, I want to have the front of the rudder. Now what I do, the piece that hangs off, I'll put a couple dots on it. Now I can transpose that down to where the dots are on this side. I won't waste another chunk of wood. And because they're a little bit oversized, I'll be able to trim it right up. And of course, what I'll do is I'll save these patterns. For next year, maybe this will be a great flying plane and we'll want to have these patterns, even if nothing else, just to compare the amount of side area. This is 10 square inches, and this is smaller than last year's plane, so we hope that's going to cure some of the weather veining. If you've seen the 94 tapes, you know how many changes we made to cure the weather veining. Okay, now from the cardboard, of course, we've cut this out on the Dremel saw. We'll assemble it, get all the edges nice and square, get it all glued together, and just get it tack glued up in place and see how we like it. Okay, next thing I'll take and draw a center line down this, get the airfoil shape in it, and get some airfoil shape in this rudder, and pretty much be ready to make a final decision on this rudder, whether we like it or not, or whether we're going to use it for a snow shovel or whatever.
Don't do it.
Okay, I have the rudder all roughed out, and what I did, I put thin CA along the thin edges, and most of all match. Everything get a matched airfoil in there on both sides. And what I do after it's all roughed out, I just tack glued this together. And what I want to do, get this razor out of here, I want to just make sure I have the final, because the top part of this will probably do some fancy paint or gold leaf lettering or something. I want to have a perfectly matched curve here. Kind of an airfoily curve, so I'm trying to get a real accurate match here. And I'm sanding them both together. All these edges have been hardened with CA, so you get a nice straight edge.